Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Nesmith, and I'm here to give a presentation on the making of sequels. So without further ado, let me pull up my slide deck here, and I'll give a little introduction to myself. Okay, as I said, my name is Bruce Nesmith. I was fortunate enough to be the lead designer for Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. A little bit about me and my background. I started in gaming many, many years ago, several decades ago, actually. I worked for TSR, which may mean something to some of you, the originators of Dungeons & Dragons. I worked there for many years. The product I'm probably best known for from my TSR days would be the Ravenloft box set. But I also did a bunch of other things in the D&D sphere. Worked on Gamma World, did some of their board games, and then I transited into doing video games for Bethesda Softworks. And I worked on Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, I worked on Oblivion, worked on Skyrim as lead designer, worked on Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, and most recently I worked on Starfield. So that's kind of the quick and dirty resume of things that I've done. These days, however, I'm a novelist. I've released 2 books so far. The third one will be out in March. They are based on Loki from the Norse mythology, not from the Marvel comics, movies or comics. So if you get a chance, go ahead and check them out. But we're here to talk about sequels. So what goes into making a sequel? Because sequels are everywhere in the video game business. We see them in just about every franchise that has any kind of success whatsoever. Everybody seems to want to make a sequel. Feels like it's a sure thing from a business perspective. So, the biggest sequel that would be relevant to my particular history would be the Elder Scrolls VI. But I can't talk about that. Elder Scrolls 6 is still in production, and that is not something that I can or will discuss. So we're going to talk about Fallout 4, which actually, for the purposes of this seminar, is a better choice anyway, because we want to talk about a game that has actually released as a sequel, not one that is still a twinkle in Todd Howard's eyes. So we're going to talk about Fallout 4. So, going back to the question of what is a sequel is part of a franchise, which means it has an intellectual property, or IP as it's sometimes called, that you need to understand what that is before you can make a sequel. So here are the games in the franchise for Fallout. Obviously, Fallout 1 is also in there. I didn't find a ready-made cover picture for it, so I didn't include it. But the original Fallout 2 was not made by Bethesda. Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 were. Bethesda Softworks purchased the franchise title and decided that we wanted to bring it into the modern era of video gaming because Fallout 2 was done in the old isometric style, and the capabilities of computers and consoles dramatically improved since Fallout 2's released, and we thought we could do some really cool stuff with it. So when we're looking at these franchises, there's a couple questions that we have to address. First of all, you have to realize that you can't change too much. If you completely throw out the baby with the bathwater, it's no longer seen as an actual franchise. It's no longer seen as a sequel. It's just another game that happens to have the same title. And I'm sure you all can think of some games that came out like that, where they just used the title, but they didn't actually make it be part of the franchise. However, you also cannot change too little. Your audience, the players, and everybody here is a player, myself included, we're expecting to have an experience that allows us to fondly remember the previous game while also giving all kinds of new and exciting things that we saw as potentials from that previous game. And we want to see them realized in this new one. So you've got to make enough changes that people feel like they're getting a fresh experience, they're getting something new. They already played the old game, and that's cool. If they want to play it again, they go back and play that. End result is you have to change just enough to have a successful sequel. Too much, and it's not seen as part of the franchise. Too little, and you're just seen as copying your previous efforts. So, let's look at franchises. What are the audience expectations? So first we're going to look at the definition of franchise for Fallout, because we need to have a specific here. Part of what defines the Fallout franchise is freeform character growth. In other words, you are going to go about making a Superman. That's what your character is going to be by the time he has hit maximum level. And you need to be in charge of the decisions and what kind of a character that is. And for everybody here who's played Fallout, you know that you can have a variety of different characters. So that freeform aspect is what's really important. The final character you make at level 50, 60, 70, it can't be the same as the guy to your left's character. It needs to be your character, the special things that you've done with it. The other thing that is part of the Fallout definition is the ability to explore. An open world. The player has to feel free to wander, to be able to be in control of their own destiny, to be able to go wherever they want to go to make their decisions. We are not putting the game on a rail. That is not the Bethesda experience. It's not the Fallout experience. I need to be able to choose to go left when the game is trying to push me to go right, to follow the main quest or to ignore the main quest, to explore areas that maybe I shouldn't be in yet, simply because I think that would be fun. In other words, I'm choosing my own fun. That's what open world and free to wander really means. And this is probably the most important because the previous two could be applied to a lot of different games. The Elder Scrolls franchise has both of those previous two, freeform character growth, open world exploration. But one of the things that is unique about Fallout, and definitely defines the franchise, is its level of humor and its retro vision of our future. It's not that it's a science fiction game where we're trying to see or show this is what the future should be. We're seeing what did people from the 1950s think the future would be, and let you play in that. And that's the retro vision of our future. And this is something inherited from the original Fallout games. And the sense of humor there, this sort of dark black humor that typifies Fallout, is also something that's critical and somewhat unique. And last, but definitely not least, and this is also true for all games, is those signature items, characters, and settings. So if we were to make a Fallout game and it was set in some sort of idyllic wonderland, that would not be Fallout. The Fallout setting is the post-apocalyptic future. It's bleak. The humor in it has that bleak edge to it. The characters, super mutants. Super mutants define part of what is Fallout. If we don't have super mutants, we are not meeting the audience's expectations, and the audience expects to see these things. Signature items, like the laser rifles and the plasma guns and the power armor. If it doesn't have these, we are failing to meet audience expectations, and they'll look at the franchise and they'll look at the sequel product and they'll say, this just isn't right. It's not what I expected. It's not what I paid for. It's not what I came to play. These are the things you cannot change. These are the things you have to commit to when making the sequel. And that's what we committed to when we made Fallout 4. We committed to keeping freeform character growth and your ability to make a Superman. We committed to exploring an open world, allowing you to wander freely. We committed to the humor, to the retro vision of the future, and we made sure to include all those signature items, characters, and settings that make Fallout, Fallout. The next thing that we consider is looking at the things we did well and looking at the things that we didn't do well, because both are important. And I'm sure everybody here who's played Fallout can look at those at Fallout 3 and say, this is what was great, and this is what didn't go so well. So let's look at some of the successes, some of the things that Bethesda did well. Well, actually, let me back up. This is the problem with not having an advanced slide to look at. So how you figure out what those successes and failures are, you have to gather that information. So one of the things you do is you listen to your team. the people that made the game, they were steeped in that game for years. They know what's a success. They know what's a failure. And if anybody thinks that the release of any video game, that the people who made it weren't aware of the things that didn't work well, nah, you're fooling yourself. We all know exactly what wasn't right. It just was a matter of there wasn't time or money or technology to fix the things that we wanted to fix. You have to listen to your fans. You're the people who play the game. You have a different viewpoint than the people who made the game. We kind of sit in ivory towers a little bit. We're a little too close to the product. But you guys, as fans, you tell us what was wonderful. You tell us, well, we didn't like that so well. You look at the critics' reviews. Critics sometimes have a better view of the game than either the fans or the team, because they're able to see past their own personal prejudices, hopefully, and try to look at things and see, this is what objectively is good or not good about the game. You go to the forums. Now, the forums are an interesting situation because the only people who post on forums are those people who are your diehard fans. So that's not all of your fans. These are the people who are most invested in the game you made. And so their opinion matters. And you go to the forums to find those. Postmortems. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, virtually every video game company in the world, when they've completed their game, they do what's called a post-mortem. And that is, they get the team together and they say, what did we do well? What did we not do well? And usually those post-mortems go more than to the game. They also go to the process of making the game, and they go to small things, big things, the whole enchilada. So those post-mortems are a formal way to get the information from your team about what did and didn't go well. And then you yourself, as an individual, as a specific game developer, you need to play your game with a critical eye. You can't get mired in the defense of, well, I liked this, so it must be wonderful. You have to try and see it through the eyes of your fan. You have to see it through the eyes of a critic. You have to look at it and be able to say, I did that, and it's not as good as it could have been. Or Joe did that, and it's really wonderful. We should do more of that. And most of all, you can't make excuses. As a fan, you don't care about the reasons why something was bad. You really don't. It was bad. It was wrong. It could have been better. And that's all you want as a fan, is you want us to do better. So you don't sit around and say, well, it wasn't our fault that this didn't happen because we weren't able to do X, Y, or Z. Doesn't matter. There's almost always a solution to it if you were to work hard enough. And the fan base, they don't care. So let's start with what went well, okay? Fallout 3 was a post-apocalyptic 1950s future. That went well. I think Bethesda nailed that. So we want to do a lot of the same things we did there. Obviously do them better. But we did the right thing here, and we want to learn our lessons from that, and we want to continue along that same path. Freeform character growth. I think we did a great job with that in Fallout 3 as well. And so we want to keep a lot of those things when we move into Fallout 4. We want to do them even better. Fallout 3 also allowed you to make hard choices. This was kind of a departure for Bethesda Softworks. We allowed you to make choices that mattered. You could either get good karma or bad karma in order when you completed a quest, and it was your choice. And it wasn't a matter of one is right as one is wrong. It was a matter of how did you want the world to progress. And a lot of games don't do that. When you finish a quest, you finish it the way the game designers decided you should finish it. You don't get to determine that final outcome. But in Fallout 3, we decided to try and do that. And the audience liked it. And the humor. I think we nailed the humor pretty well too, which was actually one of the things we were most concerned about. Humor is very difficult to pull off in video games. It's one of the most difficult things to write, and we had never done humor before at this level or of this nature. So we were actually concerned about it, and we were very relieved when it was received well. And the visuals. A lot of people were concerned that moving from the 3D isometric to a first-person immersive 3D would not work well, that would break one of the things that was essential for the Fallout franchise. But it turned out it didn't. And we were able to provide the level of detail and the quality of the visuals that everyone was able to celebrate. So we were very happy with that. All of these things need to be done again. They were done well, so you got to do them again. So what did we do poorly in the last one? The run and gun gameplay. There are a lot of games out there where you shoot guns and where you're moving around in an action setting, and we didn't really rise to the level of our competition there. We kind of slid in under the wire for what an RPG finds acceptable, but it was definitely an area where we were weak. So this was something we knew we needed to improve. Limiting player growth. Anybody who remembers Fallout 3, the shipped version before DLC, you reached a certain level and then the game was over. You couldn't play any further. You were done. There's a limit to how high you could go in level. And initially we thought this was going to be a great thing, and we had a horrific backlash from the audience. They hated it. And so we almost immediately released a way to have your player growth be unlimited. Faces and animation. We heard a lot about the quality of the faces. We heard a lot about the quality of the animation. They were not up to the industry standard. They were good enough for an open world RPG, but it's an area where we could have done better. It's something that we had to acknowledge. We could do better with this. State changes in the world. When you have a big open world RPG, and in particular, when you have one where you are allowing the players to make hard choices, they want to see those choices reflected in the world. They want to know if they did something, they see the result of it, that the world just doesn't look the same, none of the characters care about it. And we didn't do as good a job as we could have with state changes. Those state changes just didn't feel compelling. They felt like they were minimalist. So that was something where we needed to make some improvements. And glitches and bugs. There were just too many of them. There were too many things that were glitchy. There were too many things that were broken that had to wait for a patch to come out to fix. And we knew we needed to ship a more solid game the next time. So when you look at the list of things you did poorly, you either need to stop doing them at all, or you need to do better. And that's an interesting thing to think about. It is actually a legitimate decision to just stop doing them. Now, none of the things in this list fell into that category because of the particular situation with Fallout 3, but if something didn't turn out well, it is a serious consideration to say, just don't do it at all next time. Now, the next question. What can you do that's new and fresh? So the players, they don't want to have a game that's just like the last game, but with a different story. That's what DLC is. And they don't want to buy a whole new game that's just a big DLC. They want a brand new game. They want something that is new. They want something that's challenging. They want something to get excited about. So for Fallout 4, we let you build your own settlements. That was new. That's something you couldn't do in Fallout 3. That was something cool. Power armor. This was probably one of the big ones. Power armor in Fallout 3 was just like regular armor. It just had better numbers. And that's kind of boring, especially when you're putting on an entire suit. It's supposed to do all this cool stuff for you. So we actually devoted an entire team to creating a whole new mechanic for power armor and a whole new way to operate it. And in Fallout 4, when you get into power armor, it's almost like you're playing a different game. Everything works differently. The armor degrades. Regular armor doesn't degrade like that. You have to put power cells in it to power it up. You can jump from almost any height and survive it. These are all things that make the game completely and utterly different. And we added legendary creatures and legendary items. We never had a system like this before. This was also to help address the power curve question of allowing characters to grow longer and for as much as the players wanted to play. And we had to put in a new dialogue system. This ended up being a point of controversy, which I'll talk about later. But voicing the player in a brand new dialogue system were things that we wanted to have in there because we thought it would be new and exciting and give you something different. We had never voiced the player character before. That was completely new for us, and it dramatically increased the voice budget. And the new dialogue system was something completely different, considering we had basically the same dialogue system for our last 3 or 4 games. So this was a cool new thing. And here's the lesson you have to learn about new and fresh things. Don't bite off too much. And this is a lesson that, quite frankly, Bethesda has struggled with. We always get excited about all the new things that we can do, and we generally end up trying to do too much, and that's a problem. And it's something that you have to be very careful of. And we've managed to succeed largely, but it is something that we try to watch out for. So, to recap, the big 4 things that you look for when you're making a sequel. You got to keep the best stuff. You look at everything that you did well and you say, I got to do that again. Maybe a little bit better, but it's got to be to the same level of quality, and it has to be in the game. You got to dump or fix the stuff that didn't work. The worst stuff, that's got to go. And you know it's there. You saw it. It's in your code. It's in the game. There's no point in keeping it. You got to get rid of it. And then you got to give them something new. And this is the part that can be dangerous because you can do too much, but you got to give them something new, something they haven't seen before, something that wasn't in the previous game. And you need to exceed expectations. And this one is very difficult for a studio to control. Expectations, I do an entire talk about expectations, by the way. It's a topic that is worth its own hour of conversation. But expectations are set by the game that you made before. They're set by your marketing department. They're set by fans, just what they want. But if you know what the expectations are and you don't deliver them, your sequel will be seen as not successful. So you need to exceed what the fans are looking for. And all of this is really easy to say. It's actually extremely hard to do. So being able to do all that stuff, we have a saying that is not unique to Bethesda, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. So these are the things you need to do, and it's a lot easier to say than it is to produce. So here's a question you can ask yourself. If I were there in person, I'd actually ask it out loud and I'd let you answer me, but we're not in a situation where we can do that. What would you do for the next Elder Scrolls? Although, actually, I can't talk about the Elder Scrolls, like I said. So what would you do for the next Fallout? That's the question that we would have to ask ourselves. So here's a chart that I put together looking at Fallout 4. So this would be to try and look forward to the next Fallout, be it 5 or 79 or whatever it might happen to be. I basically went through all of the critical reviews, and I looked at whether those things were mentioned positively or negatively. I made a compilation of everything that was mentioned, and I counted it up. This took quite a while to put together. So this is an attempt to remove my own personal feelings or the personal feelings of any of the staff from it and see what did the people out there think was good and bad. So these were the things that were mentioned positively. Number one thing was the quality of the content, and that made us really happy. So the quests, the games, the way you move about and shoot and do the things you do, people really loved that. So we were extremely happy with that. The environment and the points of interest, that's what POI stands for. Everybody loved that. So the game world itself, the world that you explore, they thought that was great. So we were also extremely happy with that. Significant step down, but still extremely positive reaction, the workshop settlement system. They really liked that. I thought that was great. That was one of the new things that we added. So we were very happy that there's something new that we brought in. was seen so positively. The side quests. And this is something that has always been done well by Bethesda, and our fans always respond well to it. They love the side quests, the parts of the game that were not part of the main quest. And our gunplay guys were ecstatic to see first-person shooting, the gunplay, be up here so good, or up here so high, because that's something that we acknowledged as something that was weak in Fallout 3. So the fact that we did it and did it well, that was a big moment. Modding weapons and armor. This was a new system. I didn't list the new systems on the previous slide. It was definitely a new system, and we got a positive response to it. Same with the main quest, the voiced PC, VATS, perks and leveling. This was something I personally worked on, so I was very happy to see that it was seen well. Companions. We didn't really have companions in Fallout 3, at least not like we did here in Fallout 4. We did a lot of it. And there's a bunch of little stuff. Mouse overlooting, stability and bugs. We were very happy to see that because Bethesda's always struggled with that. Sound design. The legendary system was received well. Power armor was received mostly well. Not as big a moment as we would have liked, but it was there. Getting down into the art, the character models, the combat AI, how difficult it was, and you can see the rest of them here. The last one's interesting, the dialogue, the 4-button system. We put together a brand new dialogue system where there are always 4 choices.
We're gonna play some zero.
Recording in
we
progress.
got positive mentions, but only a few. So now let's look at the flip side. These are the things that were mentioned negatively, okay? The new radiation system, the items don't take damage, legendary encounters, melee combat. I mean, barely any negatives. You'd actually have to say these were neutral, much like the things at the bottom of the previous slide had a neutral reaction. Now, interestingly, just because something was mentioned positively does not mean it will also not appear on this list in the negative mentions. So the quests, for instance, they got a couple of negative mentions. A couple of people weren't so fond of them. The local map, power armor, had about equal, actually a little more positive than about negative. First-person gunplay, difficulty, companions, character models. So we got some positives, but we also got these negatives. So they actually, people wanted them to be even better than they were. Crashed or froze. Unfortunately, we had too many of that. People didn't like the procedural quests. Workshop settlements. Notice I had big mentions in the positive and also significant mentions in the negative. So obviously there were some conflicted opinions about that. Overall, more positive than negative, though. The Pip-Boy interface, not received so well. The dialogue system, way more negative views than positive views. So you'll notice in Fallout 76, we tried to make some fixes to that. The workshop interface, not so great. Pathfinding issues, not so great. Frame rate issues, that was the #1 negative that everybody mentioned. That was something that most people found was just unacceptable. So that is the end of this presentation. As sometimes happens when I am doing this remotely rather than in person, it ran a little faster than I would like. It's because I continually talk. I don't get to react to the audience or ask you questions or go back and forth. So we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of things here. But in order to do that, because of the limitations of Zoom, I need to stop. Let me do this first. I'm going to need to stop the Zoom session and restart it. So if Alex is there, and I assume he is, he's going to help me out with that. So just sit tight. I'll be back very, very quickly, and we'll start this all over again.
Recording.
Okay, so thank you everyone for bearing with us, given that this is unusual. If you would like, anyone who does have questions, please come up and make a line at this microphone. And if you are interested, the microphone will pick up questions to Bruce remotely. We have a lot of time for that, so please take your time. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Do we have audio?
Yes, we can hear you if you can hear us.
Okay, yep, I can hear you. Okay, thanks for putting up with the technological limitations here. I apologize for this being remote rather than in person, but I had some issues, so I had to do this remote rather than being there in person. But yes, sir, what is your question?
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, so you mentioned that taking audience feedback was a part of evaluating previous games for planning sequels. How do you? I know that personally, as someone who works in the games industry, I know that audience feedback can be. They have a lot of opinions about everything all the time, and some of them can be quite vitriolic. How do you sort through the? How do you sort through the audience feedback so that to figure out like exactly? What is something that the audience in general tends to feel as opposed to just a small minority?
That's a good question because it actually takes a lot of work. Obviously, people send us feedback in a lot of different ways. I mentioned the forums in the talk. We get emails. We have a large group of community managers that manage all kinds of social media. And a lot of times it becomes a matter of numbers. We're fortunate that we have an enormous fan base, so we get thousands of responses. And those things that are only mentioned once or twice, probably they're outliers. Things that get mentioned over and over again, those are the things we need to focus on. So our community managers, they do an amazing job of helping us ferret through that. They compile a lot of lists for us. They give us a lot of feedback. We have our own staff that goes onto forums and listens to what people say. People like myself end up sometimes talking to people directly, but we take it any way we can get it. You write us a handwritten postcard, we will write that down somewhere and count that as part of the feedback, because that feedback is difficult to get and it is precious. And in terms of the vitriol, you got to have a thick skin in this business. You know, no matter who you are, no matter how amazing your game is, somebody is going to tell you that it really sucks. So you just have to say, okay, that's your opinion. I'm sorry you feel that way. You know, I'm glad you gave me your opinion and move on. You can't let yourself get sucked down into a depression because you think this one person didn't like your game. You have to look at things from a larger perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my question is, when you come up with concepts such as like the settlements, how do you figure that something actually belongs in that franchise and like naturally fits in, and like what is something that's like too far removed from it?
That actually can be tricky sometimes because what you're talking about is a matter of opinion. I could give you 3 different things and you might not agree with me on what you think is appropriate for the sequel. So that's largely where Todd Howard is the final arbiter of it. We all put in our opinions. We all tell him we think this should or shouldn't be in there. But ultimately, it's his call. He's the game director. He's the steward of the franchise. He's the person who says, this is what feels appropriate and this is what we're going to go with. No, that's too much. That's a step too far. That's going to be too difficult. And he gets a lot of input from people like me who say, well, if you think we ought to do that, Todd, it's going to be really hard. Or, oh no, that's trivial. We can do that in a heartbeat. We should absolutely do that. Do it twice. But at the end of the day, he's the guy who's got to make the call.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The first question actually answered a good part of what I was wondering about, which is how you triage the feedback that you get, basically. I was also wondering how much feedback from one game affects the others, so how much feedback from Fallout might influence the next Elder Scrolls game, or the other way around.
Alex, if you could repeat that question, he broke up a little bit there.
So I believe the relevant part was, does feedback on one franchise, such as on Fallout or the Elder Scrolls games, influence development or design questions that you might have about the other franchises in the larger event?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you look at Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, well, let's just compare Fallout 4 to Skyrim, okay? There's a lot of things that are similar to that. To each other there. They're both open world franchises. They both have freeform character development. They're both trying to be big and epic. So what our audience does and doesn't like about one of them definitely impacts another. It's also kind of the cheater way to get fresh feedback when you've got a lot of time between franchises. So, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, that's over 10 years old now. So when they go to do Elder Scrolls 6, they're not going to be looking at the Elder Scrolls 5 feedback very much. They're most likely going to be looking at Fallout 4 and Starfield feedback, because that's more current. It's a reflection of what the current player base wants. And both Fallout 4 and Starfield are going to be big open world games with similar character creation goals of, big uber characters. So that's going to be, they're going to look at that and use that to inform Elder Scrolls 6.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you.
Hi there. So I was wondering, whether you're personally involved or not, what improvement to Oblivion do you think Skyrim did the best?
What improvements to Skyrim? There was a word that cut out there.
What improvements to Oblivion do you think Skyrim did the best as a sequel?
Well, I did work on both of those. So that's a good question, and I'm probably in a good position. I got to put my hat on for the difference between those two here for a minute. When I look at Skyrim, I think one of the big differences is we put a story in every dungeon. If you look at the dungeons in Oblivion, they didn't have stories. There were some great dungeons, but they were, by and large, spaces that either had a story that came from outside the dungeon, part of a side quest or a main quest, or they had no story at all. But every dungeon in Skyrim has a story in it, and I think that was an amazing accomplishment. I think that was absolutely wonderful. I also think the new magic system, which is something I personally worked on and personally championed for Skyrim, was way better than the old system. It's one of the things I went to Todd and I said, I want to revamp the entire magic system. I think we can do a lot better. I think we can make it a lot more interesting. And I got some devoted resources for that. And I'm very, very happy with the way that turned out. We also tried to allow the power curve to go up a little bit higher so that you could play the game longer and your character wouldn't tap out. Unfortunately, I underestimated people's desire for that, and the characters tapped out at level 83, I want to say, and it took a DLC to increase that by having a legendary stat so that you could continue to go beyond that. Those are probably the big items that I would say that we made significant improvements on.
Great. I played for hundreds of hours as a kid, and I definitely remember very clearly the mystery of the dungeons and like how awesome the magic was. So I think you're spot on with that. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Hi, I think this is more of, I don't really know how to phrase this question, but you had mentioned the companion system in Fallout 3 and how that was kind of a change from in Fallout 4, and how that was a change from Fallout 3. And I guess I kind of was wondering if you can expand on how that conversation went, because I'm replaying Fallout 3 right now, and I know I get super disappointed when your followers die. So was that kind of what led to the changes in Fallout 4 where that doesn't necessarily happen and they're more companions than followers who can die?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Players don't like it when their companions die. That's not considered to be a friendly thing. And they didn't like having to play the game where they're constantly playing defense. Instead of being able to just enjoy what's in front of them, it was like, oh, I got to stop my companion from dying. Oh, they're getting hurt. This is not a good thing. That wasn't received well. So both for Skyrim and for Fallout 4, because Fallout 3 preceded both of them, we made dramatic improvements to the companion system. And we've continued to make improvements as we go forward. But in Fallout 4, it was like we want the companions to actually feel like they have their own big story beats. We had done a little bit of that in Skyrim, but not a lot. And definitely we didn't do it in Fallout 3. And so for Fallout 4, we wanted them to feel like they had their own story. We devoted quest resources to giving them their own story. We made sure that they can't die. It's a technical term internally to the studio, but they're called essential. And essential characters do what's called essential down when they should die. They fall to the ground, usually down to one knee, and then they moan and groan a lot. And they can't get up until either the fight's over or until you heal them specifically. And that's how we dealt with making sure that they don't die, but that they're not affecting balance because they shouldn't be there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So my question has to do with game difficulty. Having recently played the new God of War game and having your companion shout the answer to the puzzles in 15 seconds, not even giving you the opportunity to figure out, like video games are, you play them because you want to figure out the puzzle. And also allowing accessibility to, for recently teaching my 11-year-old niece how to play video games and the language of video games. Have you guys been working on an emphasis of accessibility and also difficulty customization that lets players fight things that they want to fight and not bash their head against the wall when they don't feel like it, especially now having a job where I'm working 60 hours a week and I'm like, I want to play this, but I don't have 400 hours to put in anymore?
Some of the answers to that are no. Some of the answers to that are yes. We know in advance that the games we make are designed for long play. And we know that our audience likes to have a more sophisticated set of rules. Notice I avoided the word difficult, to run those. So rather than shy away from it, we try to mark the box appropriately. Our games are marked M for mature. You'll notice if you play Skyrim and you play Fallout, that there is a difference in language there. Fallout has more adult language in it. Skyrim shies away from that pretty hard. A couple of the books are a little over the line, but by and large, the characters, the language that they use, doesn't contain swear words and usually avoids extremely adult topics. So it's more PG-13. And when we first started writing Fallout, we actually had a problem. We were coming off of Oblivion, and we were told it's okay to swear in your writing now. And like every third word was F this and S that. And, you know, the lead designer for Fallout 3, Emil, had to come back to us and say, guys, you're just throwing in swear words. You got to knock that off. You know, and it has to be done appropriately. And it was a learning curve to learn how to do that. So we do pay very close attention to it. We are keenly aware of the things we do that are adult-oriented, but we don't do a whole lot to help out the situation for very younger viewers or very younger players because we mark our games appropriately. I believe Skyrim had a no blood feature, but I don't believe Fallout 4 did. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I don't believe it did. So on that end, yeah, we don't do it. Refresh my memory in the second part of your question, because that was the thing we did do.
customization and difficulty. Like, if you want to play on hard mode, but you want boss battles to be harder, but not every little enemy that you run across where it takes you an hour.
We do include a difficulty slider. It's not my favorite part of the game. I think we could do better, but you can set it to very easy, and that will make the game substantially easier for you. You had also mentioned puzzles, and I share your frustration with companions that yell out the answer to puzzles. Puzzles provide a unique challenge, though. The problem with a puzzle is either you get it or you don't. And if you don't, the game sucks. And if you do, sometimes you think it's too easy. There's this sweet spot where the player has to, and it's the player, not the character, has to noodle about for a minute, and then it has the aha moment. And you want everybody to drop into that. And unfortunately, not everybody can, and that's challenging. I prefer to have the more passive way where you can ask your companion for help. And we didn't necessarily do this as well as I would have liked. And that way, it's up to you to do it. Having the companion actually shout out the answer, I do believe ruins puzzles. But there's a reason why when you look at puzzles in RPG video games, there's a rule of 3 going on, and the puzzles can actually be solved by just working through the permutations, because players tend to frustrate players who can't get them right away. So it's something that I think the industry in general needs to work to get better at, but it's a very challenging situation. It's not something that's easy to solve.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I, for one, love the motion puzzles in Breath of the Wild, so there you go. As I look weird with my Switch. I know it's a panel about sequels, but for the first time, I guess in decades or so, BGS is working on something completely new, clean slate, blank canvas with Starfield. So I'm wondering, what can you take from the sequel feedback and everything and apply it to this brand new franchise?
First of all, let me say I am not authorized to talk about Starfield. So I'm going to have to answer your question in a roundabout way on some topics.
Yep.
Because that wouldn't be fair to everybody working on it if I were to spill the beans on things that I shouldn't be.
Sure.
But it's already been said publicly that Starfield is a big open world BGS style game, that it's going to have open character development. And so, like I mentioned earlier, those things are common to all of our games. So all the feedback on Fallout 4, relevant to open world gaming, relevant to character development arcs, all that feedback is definitely applicable and is definitely listened to and going to be used to create Starfield. In terms of what they're doing, I can't comment on that. But it's definitely feedback that can be listened to. In terms of spaceship battles, obviously there's not a lot they can draw from Fallout on that. That's not going to apply very much. There aren't going to be any dragons appearing in Starfield. I think I can comfortably say that out loud here. So any feedback having to do with those isn't going to make it into Starfield. But a lot of the big generic things, what you like in character animations and faces, what you like in open world systems, freedom to play, quest structures, all of that stuff is definitely being paid attention to.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Another question this time. So Fallout and Oblivion have really become known for their user mods, and they have very extensive modding communities on PC. How does the existence of user-created content like this, does that affect the design of these games at all?
Absolutely. We are blessed to have an amazing mod community. Probably one of the best in the world, to be quite honest. And part of it is because we've been so open about giving our fans the tools and so accepting of the extra tools that they create that sit on top of our own code base. But when we see a lot of the same kind of mod coming up, or we see a particular set of mods that are extremely popular, we sit up and take notice. It's like, okay, maybe we should be putting that in the game to begin with. People obviously want this. They're gravitating towards it either by making multiple mods or having something that's very popular. Unfortunately, sometimes the technology won't let us do some of the things that are done in the mods. A lot of the mods, as you're probably aware, require some pretty high horsepower PCs to operate. Sometimes the mods accept certain glitchy behavior that it would be unacceptable in a released game, so we can't do it. Or some of the mods just plain are things that, break the game in bad ways, but hey, those players happen to love that thing. So we leave those behind to the mod community to do, but we definitely take a lot of lessons from the mod community. We'd be fools not to if you think about it. It's like its own little piece of feedback there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those mods have definitely really extended my enjoyment of those games, so it's great to hear that it's something that Bethesda really thinks of.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Hello again. This isn't directly about sequels, but the question about puzzles made me a little curious. One of the things I noticed in Skyrim is that whenever there's a gate or one of those puzzle locks or anything of that nature, if you have to hunt for the solution, the lever, the button on the wall, or anything like that, it can always be found within line of sight to the door that you're trying to open. And I'm curious now if that's the sort of thing that you go into with the intention of doing ahead of time, or if that's just a design trick that emerges organically as you streamline the level and make sure that players understand it and that sort of thing.
That's a very intentional thing. It's no accident whatsoever. There is nothing more frustrating than having to do what we call a pixel hunt in a dungeon.
Oh, yes.
Because our environments are extremely detailed, and they are not geomorphic in the sense that everything is on a tile. So it's really challenging. And when we do our play tests, what we find in general is that if the lever or the button or the key is not prominent, the players miss it and they never find it. And that's really frustrating. So one of the tricks, for instance, and I'll give this to you, something you can look at, every lever you need to pull, every key you need to pick up, every item that is a requirement has a light on it. We actually illuminate it. So if you're struggling to find something, look at where the lights are shining. Odds are pretty good it's there. But during playtesting, a lot of that stuff gets moved around, shifted. If it's really bad, we'll put a quest target to it. Because it's not fun, and we want the players to have fun. So there are cases where you have to go way over to another part of the dungeon to pull a lever. But when that's done, we tell you you have to do that. And we put a quest target to it, or we really make sure you're aware you have to go over and get that thing way over there. If it's just here's a door and I don't know how to open it, there must be a lever somewhere, it's going to be very, very close. It's not going to be far away. Because it's just frustrating for the players. They don't find that activity fun.
Okay, I definitely appreciate those tricks because it takes a lot of the friction out of getting from point A to point B.
Yes. Finding the hidden lever is not fun gameplay.
All right, I believe that is the last of our excellent questions. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Bruce. If there's anything you want to say to conclude, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to say thank you all for coming to my talk. I really appreciate it, and I'm really sorry I was not able to attend in person, but I hope MAGFest is a wonderful success for all of you.